Hello, today I'd like to read you a story that I was reminded of on Friday. Yesterday I read it again after a long time, and I was reminded of how much I like this story. It's a story that I shared with some of you in Buenos Aires a few months ago. It's called Before the Bath by Ismail Kadaré, and it's been translated from the Albanian by Constantine. It's in the book Flash Fiction Forward, where I get a lot of my flash fiction fixes. Anyway, it's a story about staying in the moment. It's very beautiful, very textured, and rather shocking. But please do let me know what you think once you've finished listening to the story. If you could catch your impressions, your reactions, your feelings as you're listening to the story, please do, and let me know what you think. Before the Bath by Ismail Kadaré. He approached the tub of hot water, his eyes clouding with pleasure. How many times had he dreamt of this tub in his cold tent on the plains? And just as he dipped one foot in the water, he turned and looked at his wife, who was walking a few steps behind him. Her face still wore the flickering smile, but even more than by the smile, his attention was caught by the metallic sheen of the object twinkling beneath the fabric his wife was carrying in her hands. Although his whole body was moving towards the bath, climbing into the tub, his curiosity still made him turn his head to see what the metallic object might be. Perhaps during his long absence new utensils had been invented, even for bathing. At that very moment he saw his wife almost above him, ready to cast the unfurled fabric over him. What is this crazed woman doing, he thought. Who has ever heard of a man drying himself before a bath instead of after? And an instant later, before he was even seized by the terror of the thought that the fabric looked more like a net, he felt his arms entangled, and in the same instant saw the short axe in his wife's hands. The pain on the right side of his neck and the first spray of blood seemed to coincide with a shout of "Murder!" which he heard as if from the mouth of another. He found himself outside the tub again, as if to amend an error, and, as before, he dipped one foot in the water, then saw his wife, who was walking a few steps behind him, saw the flash of the axe beneath the fabric, and, unable to make out what was happening, before he was even seized by the terror of the fabric turning into a net that bound his arms, he heard the first slash, and the blood reddened the water. He found himself outside the tub again, as if to amend something, but this time slowly, as if he were coolly trying to resolve a misunderstanding. He approached the tub. The hot steam made everything seem more distant, his eyes clouding with pleasure. How many times had he dreamt of this tub in his cold army tent, when frantically covered in grime he had made love to a captive. And just as he dipped one foot in the water, he turned and looked at his wife, as if to assure himself that happiness was very near. Her face still wore that flickering smile, like a flickering, shifting mask, but even more than by the smile, his attention was caught by the metallic sheen of the object twinkling coldly beneath the fabric his wife was carrying in her hands. And yet he thought as intensely of the love he would be making to her very soon, as he thought that this metal, or rather hoped that this metal, had something to do with one of her surprises, those sudden and pleasurable surprises when he returned after long separations. At that very moment he saw his wife above him, and the fabric turning into a net. His arms caught, the axe, the slash, the spray of blood, the cry of murder, all happening in such quick succession that they intermingled and became one, until he found himself again outside the tub, moving towards her, found his wife walking a few steps behind him with the fabric in her hands, and this time the memory of the tent on the plains, his wife's mask-like smile, the flashing of the axe as it hit the water, all intermingled with lightning speed and making way for the slowness that was to follow. Before he saw his wife, he saw her shadow on the water, and then, when he saw her holding the unfurled fabric, he wanted to say to her, "Darling, what is this new little trick of yours?" But it was just at this moment when the fabric took on a new guise, with nodes and nerves like those on the wings of bats, and the fabric slowly flew over his head, and the closer it came, the more clearly he saw that it was a net. And before he even felt his arms grow numb as it touched them, before the axe hit him in the head, he said to himself, "This is the end." And from that moment, and from the moment of this thought to the moment the blood reddened the water, it seemed as if an interminable time had passed. He found himself outside the tub again, moving towards her, as he had a million times before, experiencing with different rhythms this final fragment, these last 22 seconds of his life. This was the hell of Agamemnon of the house of Atreus, murdered by his wife on the first day of his return from the plains of Troy at 1300 hours and 20 minutes, March 31st, in the year 1199 before our era. That was Before the Bath by Ismail Kadaré, translated from the Albanian by Peter Constantine. Please do let me know what you thought. Thank you very much for listening. See you next time.